Occasionally, I like to experiment with an old recipe because some of them can be fun to try to figure out. Here's an example. This is an old recipe. This came from my college days. It's a photocopy that I got from a professor that I was dating. It was innocent enough. She wasn't one of my professors. I wasn't doing it for grades, but anyways, I wanted to try this because one of the ingredients is a vitamin C tablet. And I thought, what? Vitamin C? Nothing mentioned in any of my baking, cooking textbooks, nothing there. But I went online and it said vitamin C is a bread dough enhancer. And supposedly it works with the yeast and the gluten in the flour to make a softer bread crumb in the finished bread. I got to try that. I've never heard of that before. I got to try it. The other thing about this was it didn't make any sense because you just toss things in whole. You toss the tablet in, you take some lemon or an orange rind, a little of both, you peel a little bit off, and toss it in. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense because someone's going to end up with a vitamin C tablet or a lemon rind or orange rind in their slice of bread. What? Turns out, I'm 99.9% positive that this is a photocopy from a booklet that came in the box with a blender. So the ingredients, the wet ingredients, are blended in a blender before adding it to the flour to make the dough. You could do this in a food processor. I've never done that before, so I got to try that. So this is a basic sweet bread dough. I'm going to make it plain as is, just sweet, because I want to see what that texture is going to be like. But you could enhance this with some cinnamon, some nutmeg. You could put dried fruit in. You could use the dough to make jelly rolls, cinnamon rolls. I think that's the idea behind this. So let's make this sweet bread. This is my first challenge. Is this the right amount of flour? The recipe calls for 5.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Is that scooped? Is it sifted? How do they measure it? If you know anything about baking, you know you get your best results by doing things by weight. A lot of recipes consider 1 cup of flour to be 5 ounces. So what I have here is 27 ounces, 765 grams of all-purpose flour. I can adjust the flour or the moisture later on if I need to get the dough to the texture I want. And then I'm adding to this 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to just blend that together. And then I'm adding 2 tablespoons of butter. By weight, it's 1 ounce or 28 grams. I'm going to put that in there, get that blended in, and then I'm going to use my fingers to start blending in that butter. Get it distributed fairly well in the flour. Okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to start setting up my blender. All right, this is my first time doing this. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of yeast. You can use a packet of yeast. I'm just going to put in a scant tablespoon. That's active dry yeast. And then 1 of my vitamin C tablet. That is so weird, but we'll see what happens. I might use vitamin C in all my bread from now on in. Then I need 2 strips of lemon peel and orange peel. So I have my vegetable peeler here. This lemon came from my neighbor's tree. She doesn't use her lemons. So she tells me to take them. And actually other people take them too. There's a woman in the park who uses the lemons for cleaning. That's cool. It's okay. So 2 of those. This I bought in the store, this orange. 1 of those, and 1 more. All right, those are in. 2 tablespoons of sugar. This is granulated sugar. 2 tablespoons. And then 1/2 cup, which is 1.5 ounces, 43 grams of instant powdered milk. Powdered milk or milk powder, dry. And then 2 large eggs. I have a third one here because I'm going to be using that for making an egg wash afterwards. 2 eggs, 2 large eggs. And then finally, 1¼ cups, which is about 300 milliliters of warm water. This is just warm tap water. And the directions say to blend this for about 30 seconds. And I got to figure out how my thing works. I'm going to start it low. All right, I switched that up to high, and I blended that pretty well because I wanted to make sure that those pieces of rind are really cut up well. And what I'm going to actually do just to test it is I'm going to strain this and make sure there are no big lumps of rind in that. So I'm going to take this out, put this back, get a strainer out, and then let's see what I've got here. I just have to see what I got after this is all strained. I want to just push that through. And actually looking at what I have left there, there's no huge lumps. Some that are a little bit big, but actually no big lumps of peel. So I'm going to put that in there, and we're going to call that a day. I wanted to mention one thing. You don't have to do all this in a blender if you don't want to, or a food processor. You can do it by hand. So I used a couple of pieces of my rind, but if you have a microplane grater, you can zest your orange and your lemon to get the zest that you want. As far as the vitamin C tablet, you could break that down with a spoon in a bowl until you reduce it to a powder. But I thought it might be fun to try this recipe as it was written. Returning now to my flour, I'm going to add my wet ingredients to my dry ingredients. Like so. And then just to show you something, my tray is empty. That means I haven't forgotten any ingredients. That's another trick I learned from watching Julia Child videos. She said put all your ingredients on a tray and make sure it's empty before you're done. I'm going to combine this until I have a dough that I can knead. And again, I might need to adjust this with more flour or more moisture. And I'm done with this. I'm going to transfer this to my counter. I might actually need to increase that moisture a little bit, seeing what's here, but I'm going to knead it first. All right, going to get my hands in there and start kneading. You want to knead this until it's smooth. Whatever it takes, 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Work it all together. What I'm looking for is a dough that'll be moist and slightly sticky. I've got this smooth enough, but it's not moist enough. It's not sticky the way it should be. So this is where you have to make adjustments, and this does happen, especially when you're working with an older recipe. I'm going to add water, about a tablespoon at a time, just to moisten this up a little bit. And slowly work this in. This will take a while. Okay, there's my bread dough. And I got to tell you, see, that's moist, sticky. It's what I want, but I can work it without my hands getting all, gummed up. It took me 8 tablespoons. That's half a cup of water to get that texture the way I like it. This is the way I like to see bread dough. I ended up moving this to my stand mixer. and kneading it with the dough hook because I just had to keep adding water, adding water, adding water. I don't have all day. So I'm adjusting my recipe to 1 3/4 cup of warm water, which is about 400 milliliters, a little bit more than that. It's about 414 milliliters. Okay, meantime, what I have done is I have greased my bowl. I washed it out and greased it. Gonna put my dough in there. Oh, that dough feels good. That is exactly what I like. And then I'm gonna grease the top of that with some butter so that the plastic doesn't stick, because I'm gonna cover this with plastic. Okay, that's good enough. I'm going to cover this with plastic and let this rise for at least, I would say at least a half an hour, maybe an hour. Whatever it takes for that to be doubled in bulk. I want to see that dough just about coming up to the plastic that I have covering the bowl. Look at that bowl, how much that has filled up with dough. Another reason to have a nice moist bread dough rather than a pasta dough, which is what I started off with, it felt like. Gonna lift my plastic off, gonna punch this down. All right, get it out of the bowl. Nice and moist, look at that. I'm gonna divide that into 2 for loaves. This is a bowl scraper, but it'll work as a cutter. Okay. And then what I've done is I've lined a baking sheet with parchment paper. So I'm going to shape a loaf here, some rather longish loaves. Pinch it together. What I'm looking for is a nice smooth top. It's not quite the way I want it. Press it down again, bring it up, pinch it together. And what that does is it kind of stretches the top, see, into that nice, smooth, rounded shape. Place that on my baking sheet. Do the same thing with the other one. There are my 2 loaves. Position that one a little bit differently. Okay. Now I'm going to make an egg wash, and I'm going to coat the top of these with an egg wash and put some almonds, some sliced almonds on top. Okay, to make an egg wash, I'm going to put an egg in there. Almost didn't get that egg open. And then I'm going to put in, let me beat that up a little bit first. Then I'm going to put in maybe 2 tablespoons of milk. 1, 2. That'll be enough. Mix that up well. Okay, there's my egg wash. And what I have here is I have a package of sliced almonds. This is 1/2 cup, which they're saying is 2.25 ounces or 63 grams. I'm going to use a pastry brush here to lightly coat these with egg wash. Some people have said use a silicone brush. You won't get any bristles, any hairs in your food. Well, they never come out. I never get bristles coming out of this thing, and I've had this for years. And then I opened my almonds, and I want to just sprinkle lightly the almonds on top. And by the way, that first rise was exactly 1 hour. And my favorite place for raising dough, letting dough rise, is on top of my computer because it's warm there. Now, next thing I want to do is cover that with a piece of plastic. Put place a piece of plastic over that. Just lightly, I don't want it to stick to the dough. And I'm going to let that rise for about another 30 minutes or so. So there are my loaves after they went through a second rise. As I was waiting for my oven to come up to temperature, I filled in a few more spots with almonds. I'm going to bake these in my 375 degree oven, which is about 190 degrees Celsius. I'm going to bake these for 30 to 35 minutes till they're nicely browned. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check them with a thermometer, because I like to see my bread dough, my loaves, come up to 195 degrees, maybe above that, which is about 91 degrees Celsius. And I might, just to experiment, I think I'm going to put a little more egg wash on one of these loaves to see how it'll look with a second coating of egg wash. It's always fun to experiment. Here are my loaves out of the oven. You can see which one I coated with extra egg wash. It made the almonds brown a little bit. Here the almonds did not brown. It gave it a glossier look. I'm thinking I'm going to use this loaf because it has more of a finished look to it to give away, because I've been invited to a wine and cheese gathering tomorrow. What I need to do now is transfer these loaves to my cooling rack. Like so. Done with this. And there are my loaves. Can let these cool down and then cut into one. I want to see what the crumb is like inside. I'm going to cut into this one and then taste it, see what it tastes like. I'm going to cut this loaf because the nicer looking one I'm going to bring to a friend's house, as I said. So I'm going to cut through the middle of this to see what it looks like on the inside. I can tell by the feel of that knife going through it that it's a nice tender crumb. Look at that. Beautiful bread. Beautiful bread. All right, I'm going to cut a slice for myself, butter it, have a cup of coffee made, and I'm going to have a little afternoon snack. Cut a little slice for myself, half a slice, just enough to taste it, because I want to know what that crumb is going to be like, the inside of the bread, how delicate, how tender that might be, and how sweet. That's tender. Wow. Not overly sweet. Very mild sweetness to it, but you can just detect the citrus. It has a little bit of a citrus note to it. It's a delicious bread. I'm wondering what would this be like toasted with butter on it. That's for later. But right now, I've got a little snack for myself. I've got a cup of coffee. I'm going to go watch some football.